super excited to be sharing some really practical advice with you today. We're going to be talking all about visuals. Visuals to promote communication, visuals to use in everyday life around the house, and visuals that you might like to use at school. I'm sure many of you are already very familiar with visuals but want to learn more, and there might be some of you who have heard about visuals but just don't know where to start. So today I have invited a very passionate speech pathologist to talk with us and to help us to navigate the ins and the outs of using visuals. So strap in and get ready for some really practical advice. Today we are talking to Shae Rodgers. Shae is the founder and clinical director of Small Talk Speech Therapy and Speech Pathology Resources. She has a special interest in helping children with autism using visuals and augmentative and alternative communication, and by working out the links between communication and behaviour. Shae has a team of speech therapists who also have behaviour management training, working to improve the communication of children in the Newcastle area. Being passionate about visuals has led Shae to develop ready-made visual supports for families and schools, which can be found on her online shop. Welcome, Shae.
Thanks so much for having me, Rhiannon. I'm really excited to be sharing some tips on visuals.
Yes, excellent. I can't wait to dive into it. But before we do, I'd like to rewind the clock a little bit and just get a bit of insight into your background and how you came to start running your own speech pathology business in the Newcastle area.
Well, I decided on my career path really early on in year 10 when I did work experience at a speech pathology practice, and I just knew it was the right path for me. And I always wanted to work with children. So once I graduated from university, I went straight into a private practice job working with children, and I just really enjoyed working with kids with special needs and just the challenge of figuring out the puzzle to help them communicate and become verbal. And I found there were some restrictions on how I was able to practice in that setting, and really wanted to be flexible in delivering a high quality service. So that's when I started my own practice.
Awesome. Well, let's dive into it. So we're talking all about visuals. So I'd love to start just by asking you, what exactly are visuals for parents who aren't so familiar with them?
Visuals are a picture, symbol, sign, word or display that we use to illustrate or add meaning. And visuals, we see them all around us, all throughout the day. So they could be road signs, they could be logos, it could be packaging of our food. There's so many visuals that are all around us all of the time. So it's interesting to think about what visuals are available to children who might have language difficulties.
And we tend to use visuals a lot for children on the spectrum, and there's lots of different reasons why we use them. And I'd love to ask you, why is it that we use visuals for kids on the spectrum?
I think one of the main reasons is that generally children on the spectrum have a very strong skill set in visual learning, and I think really tapping into that strength can make a huge difference in terms of their language development, improving their behaviour, and we do know that about 33 to 50% of kids on the spectrum might fail to develop functional speech, and so giving them another avenue in which they can communicate in another language that suits their learning style early on is really important.
And there are lots of different ways that we can use visuals, aren't there? And there are 6 main ways that I'd like to discuss with you. And the first one is using visuals to communicate, because this is a real, big area that we use visuals in. How can parents use visuals to communicate? Can we touch on that?
Sure. I think there's a few different aspects to answer that question in terms of using visuals visuals to express themselves from the child's perspective. There are so many different options in terms of visual books, communication books, iPad apps that can really help the child to express themselves. And those tools really require a speech pathologist to sort of help you figure out which system is going to be appropriate for the child and where their skills lie. And another way to use visuals for families is to have the parent modelling visuals very often. So it's actually teaching them that vocabulary. They're having experiential references to the symbol set. So that means that they're able to more quickly pick up that other language that is visuals.
Okay, so at what point would a parent say, I think I might need to use visuals with my child? Is it if they're not meeting developmental milestones, or at what point is that red flag that we might think we need to use visuals for communication?
Well, I'm a big believer in using visuals for most kids. I know I used them for my son, who was a little bit delayed in his expressive language due to some ear infection. Decreasing that frustration early on, so not letting it get too difficult for the child and frustrating, and then what you find is a lot of behaviours coming out because that's the only way they can communicate. So just providing an option for them early on, and we know that visuals actually strengthen verbal speech as well. So they do create that depth of meaning and really help with vocabulary development. So I would say start it very early on, especially if your child has a diagnosis, because you're teaching that other mode of communication. So it just gives your child options. So sometimes they might not know the verbal word, but they can interpret a symbol or a photo, and that gives them that other option for communicating.
Okay. And in terms of using visuals at home to communicate, parents can make their own visuals, or where would they go to get visuals? What do they do?
There are so many resources, and these days with the internet, there are so many free tools that you can use to create your own. So even just Google Images is an awesome tool. So you can actually type in, if you want a symbol, like more of a clip art picture, or a photograph, you can sort of specify that. So I often use it for environmental visuals. So that might be a picture of a shop or the front of a building that you go to often. So you can often just get that off Google or Google Maps. So that's one tool that I really suggest. There's a lot of apps as well that can be really helpful for families that utilize that symbol set. Something like Custom Boards has a huge library of symbols that's just ready to go for you, and you can print out different grid sizes, different games using visuals using that app. Also just things like PowerPoint slides for visual social stories and vocabulary learning. There's also Boardmaker and Boardmaker Online, which is a software system that you can use to create your own visuals. And also another tool that's low cost is the website Teachers Pay Teachers. And it's very robust. There's so much you can search for on there, and they often have low cost resources that you can just download.
Awesome. And so obviously they print out the visuals, and usually they're laminated, aren't they, and stick some Velcro on the back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to laminate them, just makes them last that little bit longer, makes them more durable, and you can wipe it down, keep it clean and that sort of thing. So definitely laminating them is perfect.
Okay, awesome. Was there anything else you wanted to add in regards to using visuals for communication? I know there are different programs, and PECS is, parents may have heard of the PECS program, and I suppose they sort of tend to get confused between what a visual is and what PECS is, because they sort of intertwine.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and they have similar uses. I think the main purpose of using something like PECS is to teach the child what communication is all about in terms of I need to take a turn, then you need to take a turn, and it really teaches that behavioural reinforcement because it does focus on requesting quite a lot. So the child will be taught to request something that they really like, and then the adult will respond. So it really teaches just that early exchange process. And then it does start to build on simple sentences such as I want iPad, that sort of thing. And then in terms of using other visuals apart from PECS, you can use those for many different reasons, not just requesting. So it might be to express feelings, to protest to something instead of using a behaviour to protest, being able to say no or stop, making comments, that was fun, things like that, being able to engage with others and share their thoughts and ideas. So it's a little bit more robust to use a bigger system, but PECS can be perfect for that early communicator.
Awesome. Alrighty, let's jump to the second thing that I'd like to talk about today, and that is using visual schedules. So can you talk us through what a visual schedule is?
Yeah, sure. A visual schedule can be about an activity or a routine. So it's actually a sequence of symbols or photos, whatever your choice of visual might be, that helps the child follow a specific sequence. So I've actually got an example here. So this one is an example of a morning schedule. So it might be something like have breakfast, have your medication, get dressed, brush teeth, and then off to school. So you can obviously vary that depending on your morning routine, and it gives the child those extra prompts so that they're not having to rely on the parent to constantly remind them throughout the day. And it is that visual reminder so they can become more independent in managing their time themselves. Another example of a visual schedule is an activity schedule, and so this can be used to break down a specific activity. So this one is specific to a school setting, and the child might be listening to a long instruction that the teacher is giving about an activity. So they might be told that something from the board and then cut it up, glue it on and colour it in. So that's quite a lengthy instruction, but if you can break it down into those steps involved in the activity, then they've got that reference that they can refer back to as well. And it definitely helps to increase a child's independence, and they generally will rely less on those visuals once they're familiar with that routine or activity schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. And it really helps with that self-esteem. So when they've mastered that independence, it boosts their self-esteem, they feel more confident. And particularly with school life, it becomes a lot easier, doesn't it? There's less anxiety and they just feel more comfortable and confident. And I think it's really important.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's really important too to remember that we all use visuals, we all have a calendar or a diary or something that we use to rely on. And for these little kids who sometimes have a lot going through their brain or it's a little bit chaotic, having something that they can refer to is a really helpful strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't live without my Siri reminders and my iPhone calendar. So it is something that we rely on a lot as adults, and it's really great to think about how we can provide those types of tools in a child-friendly sort of format.
Awesome. Alrighty, so the third thing that I'd like to talk about is first, then visuals. If you ever walk into a special development school, you'll always hear the teacher saying first this, then that. If we could talk a little bit about how that is used in a visual format, that would be awesome.
Yeah, no worries. So with the first then, it often has two boxes. I don't have an example with me, but there'll be one box and then an arrow to the next box. So within those boxes, you'll have visuals that you can interchange depending on the activity that you're doing. So for instance, it might be first you need to complete a work task, or you need to complete a chore or routine, and then you can have a preferred item. So it helps with the motivation for the child. It helps them sort of understand the instruction and that consequence kind of relationship, I suppose. And oftentimes teach the child a non-preferred first step and then a preferred second step. So an example might be something we work on a bit is teaching a child to sit at the table to complete activities. So it might be first sit, then you can have a look at something on the iPad, or first sit, then we can play this game together. So it's that's one example of using a first then. And another way is, like I spoke about, routines and activity schedules. You can break that down even further. So you could say, have breakfast, then we're going to have your medication. So it's a simpler way of showing that sequence of events as well for those early communicators.
Okay. So in the first, it's putting a picture of a non-preferred activity there, and then followed up with a reinforcer under then with something that they're motivated to do. So we're getting them, encouraging them to do that first non-preferred activity. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's the most successful way to use the first then. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Alrighty. The fourth thing I'd like to cover with you is a choice board. And ways that parents can use choice boards at home, and what sort of kids might benefit from a choice board.
I think choice boards, for starters, are could be a symbol set or a page that the child has some options to choose from. So that can give the child a sense of control, a sense of purpose, and a sense of self-expression as well. So, for instance, if a child's not very good at organising their time, or they like to obsess about one specific activity or TV show, you can use a choice board. So this is an example of like a play board. So they might have a few different choices. What can I do with my time when we're at home playing? For instance, they might be able to choose, they've got a choice of a ball, playing outside, doing bubbles. So you would choose things the child is interested in, and then provide that array of choices to them. And it really depends on their level of development in terms of how many choices you would put on the page as well. Some children might only be able to handle a choice of 2 items, and other children might be able to choose from a symbol set of 12, say. And you can use those choice boards for a number of different things. So I just gave that play example. You could use it for food choices as well, in terms of what snacks might be available, and pop that on the door of the pantry. You could use a choice board for places to go, so sort of putting that near the front door if the child's getting a chance to decide what they want to do that day, maybe go to the park or the beach or something. And there are so many uses. That's a couple of examples. But it does help to decrease that frustration in terms of and behaviour in terms of the child making their own choices and having some say in what they're doing with their time.
Yeah, awesome. I can see it could be really beneficial for kids, I suppose, who have that decision-making difficulty and they can't decide. So if you could give it to them in a visual format, they might be more likely to make a choice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Alrighty. So the fifth thing, so number 5, is visuals to structure the environment. So I know a lot of parents who have sort of independently done this themselves without any input from therapists, but they've naturally started labeling things at home and around the house. So on certain shelves or in certain drawers, they'll label what goes in there. Can you talk a little bit about visuals to structure the environment?
Yeah, I know that we've talked about using visuals to add meaning and depth of meaning and build vocabulary. So the more we can have visuals present in the environment, the more that benefit that's going to have to the child. So some examples that I generally work to are having some location-specific, I'll just grab this board here, location-specific boards or vocabulary. So I know on my son's chest of drawers with his clothes, we have each drawer labelled in terms of which one's got his shirts and his pants and his nappies. So that gives him a bit of a chance to be a bit more independent. He can help with putting clothes away, getting clothes out of the drawer. And actually, it also helps my husband because then it keeps things in an orderly fashion. And also using visuals in, say, the bathroom is another place that I often suggest using visuals. So, for instance, with toilet training, having the sequence up on the wall next to the toilet, or brushing teeth. Or even a prompt board for the shower or bath in terms of what places you need to wash yourself. So generally the bathroom and the bedroom, getting dressed are areas that we focus on. And even in the kitchen, you can use labels in terms of where to find the plates and the cutlery as well, so the child can then assist with chores or meal preparation as well.
Awesome. That is really useful. And I've found a lot of parents, as I said, just start doing this themselves. Like it's something that they've found to be really useful. And I think it's so great that parents are, have this initiative and start doing this themselves. So it's fantastic to see. Alrighty. So the last thing.
Definitely. Sometimes I know parents can be quite overwhelmed with, creating so many visuals themselves. So there are so many resources that you can find on the web that are easy to download around toileting and that sort of thing. So that's definitely something to keep in mind because it's sometimes a barrier that seems so large that a lot of families have trouble to get started with that.
We might talk about that in a minute. I wanted to come back to that in terms of looking further into that and what are other options that they can use if they don't want to print off 1,000 visuals with 1,000 visuals floating around the house and can get a bit all too much.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 6. So the last thing is that I wanted to cover was I suppose this comes under the communication banner as well, but I want or can I please have visual. So it's sort of structuring that sentence to help them to ask for something. How do you use this?
I think it's a very early skill, and we do use that sort of sequence or requesting tool quite often in the early stages because the child will be very motivated to ask for things that they prefer. So it's just, teaching that exchange. They actually need to take action to get something that they want. So it's teaching that relationship of I have a turn to say something, then you have a turn. And definitely using those starter phrases is a way to extend their vocabulary and length of sentence as well. So if you have a child who's only using the single word to request, then you might go to something like an I want strip and try and build it from there. So they might then verbally be prompted to say want ball, and then you'd work backwards and then I want ball, just depending on their level of expressive language there. Yeah.
Okay. And so this is used for kids who, would you say, sort of what level of communication, for some kids who are nonverbal, is this something that you would start with, like a little I want strip, and then just have a space for a child to put a picture there of what they want, or what sort of level would they start with this?
Yeah, definitely. If a child is nonverbal, or even just using a few single words, they do need to be able to discriminate, or the therapist or parent needs to be able to preempt what they actually want. So generally we'd use it for very familiar objects. So maybe the parent is very good at interpreting how the child expresses in behaviour that they want a drink or something, and then that makes the strip more successful because they can easily choose that item for the child. But if the child has strong visual skills in choosing off a choice board or something, then that's generally where we'd work up to something like that, so that they can choose and have more options to choose from to put on the I want strip.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So we were talking a bit before about creating visuals, and for some parents this can be a bit overwhelming because, trying to get visuals for everything, you seem to have, so you get a folder and you get so many. Are there any alternatives like electronic formats that parents can use, or any apps that parents can use to sort of simplify it a bit, so they're not having to print out loads of visuals if this is not what they want to do?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of different apps available that give the visuals that digital form. It's flexible. You can customize it. So I suppose one example that I'm thinking of is ChoiceWorks app, and that's an app that uses visual schedules and routines, and even first then, and you can also add something like a timer as well that ticks down, and it's also got the finished so I'll move the item across when it's finished. So that's an electronic version of the visual schedule.
And sorry, Shae, that's called ChoiceWorks? ChoiceWorks?
Yeah.
Yep. And do you know how much that costs roughly?
Ooh, probably when I bought it, it might have been maybe like $6 or something. That one's pretty low cost.
Yeah, great.
But app prices change all the time. So
yes.
Yeah, look it up.
Sorry, I interrupted there. Were you on a train of thought? Or have you forgotten what you were going to say?
Yeah.
That's all right. Okay.
Yeah. I forgot the rest of the question.
No, that's all right. It was just seeing what sort of alternatives there were. So ChoiceWorks was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. And there are interactive visuals which really help to strengthen the child's skills. So that might be things like apps such as Bitsboard. There's one called Bitsboard where you can upload your own images. You can make games out of those images to practice the child's identification of the symbol or photo. The other apps that do similar things are Tiny Tap. You can create your storybooks and interactive activities where the child can find the photo or symbol that you're working on. And similarly, an app called See, Touch, Learn is a similar type of app to those other ones. And Special Words is an app that you can use for identifying symbols, but it also integrates the written word, and working on the written words is also a point to make in terms of strengthening those literacy skills, tapping into that visual strength as well. So it's definitely not something to be ignored, even from a young age. Just putting that written word with the visual can really have a long-term benefit.
Okay. So, yeah, in terms of using the visuals and that, you've just brought up a question for me. Should the visual always have the word under it? So if it's a picture of a dog, should it say dog underneath it?
Yeah, definitely. I would suggest that always putting the written word with the visual is definitely recommended. And that's because it taps into that visual skill and creates the awareness of a written word as well. And when we talked about adding that depth of meaning, it's not just to the spoken word then, it's also to the written word. So if they do come across it in a book, they might then relate it to that symbol and the written word that they've previously learnt.
Awesome. Okay. Alrighty. What about visuals at schools? So if parents were wanting to bring in some visuals to help their child at school, whether it's to communicate or to follow the routine a bit better, to reduce anxiety, to increase self-esteem and confidence, what are some of your top visuals that you'd recommend for kids at school?
Something we've already discussed are visual schedules for routines and activities, and I know a lot of teachers are getting really great at using these visuals for the whole class, so it just helps kids to know what's coming next and, as you said, really help with any anxiety or difficulty transitioning between tasks as well. So I know that a lot of schools use it for transitioning from a small group back to a class activity, and even just to signify when the break times are as well. So that's a way to integrate the routine and activity schedules into the school day, and also to follow instructions that the teacher is giving. So if you've got that visual representation available to the child, maybe on their desk, that they can identify specific vocabulary that the teacher is using within those instructions, just so they have something to refer to add that meaning to what the teacher is verbally expressing. One of my favourite visuals to use at schools is something like a play plan or social story. So a play plan helps the child to prepare for their break times, because I know it's a real challenge in terms of isolation or bullying or not having anyone to play with during the break time. And that stems from things like many schools that break time and maybe difficulty with social skills or play skills as well. So something like a play plan can really help the child to think about organising their time and planning, for instance, who they might play with. They might have a choice of kids in the classroom in a visual format that the teacher goes through with them. Okay, who are you going to choose to play with today? And also you might have a board of choices in terms of activities and where to play in the playground, because I know a lot of schools have separate areas, and possibly I know schools have rotations, so sometimes they might have specific years that are able to use the playground on the playground that day. So little rules like that, it's really useful to have something like a play plan, and it helps the child to think about what they would like to be doing during the break, and helps the teacher to support them to do that as well.
I love that. I love a play plan. That's awesome. And you did touch on social stories. What is a social story?
So social stories are just very simplistic representations of sort of social experiences. So for instance, it might be a little book that you put together about, say, I'll use that example of recess or lunchtime at school. So it might be touching on, these are the rules in the playground. This is some ways that I might be able to play with other kids. And it's a really simple way that the child can understand, with related pictures, and you would use probably pictures that are specific to that environment, just to create that personal, meaningful link for the child as well. And speech pathologists often are involved in the development of social stories. but there are some online tools that you can use as well to create those.
Yeah, awesome. I can see how they can be really useful at school for a whole lot of different things. We've used them, for kids to keep their hands to themselves, for the fidgeters who like to touch everyone or touch things and can't keep them hands to themselves, or sharing and taking turns, how to play with others, following the rules. Yeah, all those simple things that sort of need to be explicitly taught.
You can also use them in the community or home settings to prepare the child for something that's a bit out of routine. So it might be going to the hairdresser, going to the dentist. We actually have one on our website for new clients to our practice, and it basically shows them what the environment looks like, who's going to be in that environment, where they need to go. So it just decreases that sense of change and really helps them to prepare for what's coming and know what's expected of them in those settings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. Alrighty. Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we start to wrap it up? Was there anything else that you wanted
I just wanted to probably mention some. Yeah, I wanted to mention some tips around using AAC, because I know it's something that a lot of families tend to shy away from, maybe with the fear that using something like an AAC system, which is basically a symbol set that the child can use to express themselves, might be a speech device on the iPad. And a lot of families have a fear of using a device like that. And I think it stems from a lot of the question we get asked very often is, but I don't want my child to stop speaking. And I just wanted to sort of bust that myth and let you know about the strong research that we have that shows that that visual and that AAC system really can help develop language. And if you ever think about what we've discussed with visuals, that really makes a lot of sense, because the child's being able to connect some more meaning to the words. They've got options in front of them. They've got a huge, robust system that has so many options. So that free expression, it's not just about requesting. They can protest, they can make long sentences, they can tell a story, they can retell things during their day, and it's just a really flexible tool. I think there are so many different options available. The iPad is a tool that's really changed the realm of AAC and made it so much more affordable for families as well, because you can get some low-cost apps, even free apps to try out. But it is something that should be prescribed by your speech pathologist, because we really need to tap into the child's strengths and what works best for that particular child, because there's so many systems out there.
Okay. So AAC is augmentative and alternative communication. And so is it just basically ways of sharing our ideas and feelings without actually talking? Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, definitely. And the device will give the verbal output usually for you, but there are some AAC systems where the communication partner does the verbal output, so it just depends on the system. But what we do find sometimes is that children really respond to that consistency of speech that the device might be using. So there's specific voices that you can choose, but obviously because it's a computerized voice, the way that the words are spoken every time is exactly the same. Whereas in our general everyday life, the child is hearing that word in a multitude of different voice tones and different inflections, and we all pronounce words slightly differently. So we have found that consistency of production of words coming from a device can actually really really help the child with expressing that word as well. So we often encourage them, if they do have verbal skills, to sort of reflect back what they've chosen on the device as well. So it might be, I like playing on the playground, so you can make quite a long sentence. There's grammar support in there, so it really helps to teach sentence structure and lengthen the sentence length as well.
It's amazing what we can do these days, isn't it, with technology and everything?
Yeah.
We've come a long way. Alrighty, let's head to the 5 rapid fire questions. So, number 1, what is one habit that our listeners can implement today?
Definitely. I think just making visuals apparent in the child's environment is something that I would really encourage everyone to think about. And like we talked about, there's a lot of free tools, even just using gesture to support what you're saying, and pointing out visuals in the general environment, like stopping at a stop sign and actually pointing it out for the child. So really focusing on visuals that are all around us, and then maybe popping some labels around can make a huge difference. Just having those visuals in front of us, will make a big difference to the child's development.
I love that. I love using the visuals in everyday life. At a stop sign, wherever you are, I think that's so important, because that is in the real life context. You know, that's happening then and now, and I think it's so important that we harness that, so we're always coming back to sort of teachable moments. Number
definitely.
2, what do people never ask you that you wish they did?
I think it's a question that sort of flicks back to what we were talking about before, and what I would love if families spoke to their speech pathologist about is, will visuals improve my child's expressive language and behaviour? Because that link between communication and behaviour is not really well. People have trouble understanding the importance of visuals, and they do shy away from them sometimes in the fear of it affecting that expressive speech. But if that happens in the early years, so much opportunity has been missed to integrate those visuals and influence behaviour as well.
Okay, love it. Number 3, what book would you recommend that all parents read?
I think that one of the big differences that can be made to a family's life to really understand behaviour. And when I say the word behaviour, I know a lot of people will think of challenging behaviours, inappropriate behaviours, but it's important to think that behaviour is actually everything we do. So any action we do is a behaviour, even speech or gestures, anything that we do is a behaviour. So in that light, the book that I would suggest is Raising a Child with Autism, a guide to applied behaviour analysis for parents, because I think once we understand that, everything else just makes sense.
Okay, excellent. It's another one for parents to add to their list. Number 4, what is one of your unfinished bucket list items?
Oh, it's hard to choose one. But professionally, I would love to write a book. So that's something that I've had on the side project for a while, that I've started working on. So that's really exciting. And I do have a travel bucket list, which is to go to see the Aurora Borealis, which I think would be absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, stunning. And I'd love to find out what your book is about, if you're willing to share.
Yeah, I do find that upskilling parents on modelling and prompting and just communication strategies that they can use every day at home, and for them to identify where their child at with their communication and where they can go with that in sort of a parent-friendly format. So that's sort of the aim of the book, yeah.
Excellent. Oh, practical. I think that's what parents need more than anything, is some really practical advice on what they can do at home, and I suppose it's about feeling empowered. So parents feel part of the whole intervention process. Yeah, awesome. Can't wait. You'll have to let us know when it's out.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, awesome. Number 5, last question. If you could only offer one piece of advice to the parents who are tuning in today, what would it be?
It's tricky to choose one piece, but I think my tip would be always push for more, but don't push too hard. So you really need to find that sweet spot between too hard and too easy, and keep moving along that track step by step and really breaking it down. What can the child achieve, and just moving along there. So you're not making it too hard where it's frustrating, or too easy where they're not progressing. So that would be my tip.
Just the right balance. It's finding just the right challenge, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. And how can our listeners find out more about you and the work that you do? And if anyone is in the Newcastle area and they want to have you as their therapist, how can they get in contact?
Well, the best place to go would be our website, which is Small Talk Speech. And we have everything on there.
Just cut out there.
The online shop.
I was just going to say, so it's it's smalltalkspeechpathology.com.au. Yes.
Yep, Small Talk Speech Therapy. We have our online shop. We have a huge amount of blogs that you can look up any topic you want. So we have blogs on there about AAC and visuals, so you can read a little bit more there. We share a lot of content on there to try and educate people in the community as well.
Awesome. We'll put all the links in the show notes. Has cut out a little bit at the end, so we'll put all the links to all the devices and the different apps that you've recommended. We'll put links to your website and everything into the notes on www.homebasehope.com.au. I just want to thank you so much, Shae. I know it's been a little bit tricky trying to get in touch with you, and our connection's been a little bit poor, but we've made it through, and thank you so much. I mean, everything you've given us has been so comprehensive, and I really think that your clients down in the Newcastle area are so lucky and so blessed to have someone who's so passionate about helping kids with their communication, because it really means the world of difference to a child. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rhiannon. It's something that we are really passionate about, educating people in the community and supporting local families. So definitely
Awesome. Thanks, Shae. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.